Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Agatha of the Vile Cauldron. Agatha costs Cruel, she is a 1/1. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is her power. This effect can't reduce the mana and that costs to less than 1. Then she says 6 mana, but it's really 5 mana. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and haste until end of turn. So this whole video is all about Agatha activated abilities. So my shameless self-plug, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then comment what you want me to do next and what you think about the deck. Regardless of that, why play Agatha? Because she's super cool. She reduces costly activated abilities to creatures because, again, she costs, like, her activated ability is 6. It'll make it cost 5. If she gets bigger, it'll eventually just cost, like, a green and a red. There's multiple different play styles you can do with her, just because there are so many cool creatures with activated abilities that are big and costly. And this deck is extremely budget friendly. I didn't really hold back any cards while I was making this list, and it's only $207, which, again, not cheap, but I mean that's not like a $500 commander deck. So the game plan: this deck straight up needs her to win. She's too vital. She's too big of a factor in reducing our creatures' abilities. Otherwise, they're just going to be too costly. So our game plan is we are going to play her because she's going to come down turn 2. We are going to pump her up with counters. That's how we're going to get her power a little bit bigger. Our activated abilities are ideally only going to cost red or a green. Like Agatha, her ability is the prime example of our most expensive cost because it'll reduce that 4 to nothing, and it'll just cost a red and a green to give all our creatures +1/+1 trample and haste. Just for reference, if she didn't have a red and a green in the colorless, since she can't reduce it to less than 1, assuming that red and the green were there, we would just pay 1 mana of whatever. So we're always paying 1 for our activated abilities. And we're going to use our creatures' activated abilities to combo out and win, and we'll see them in a second. Vulnerabilities, targeted removal. When you have a commander deck that solely focuses on like kind of that creature existing on the field to win the game, that's the biggest issue. So like we get cut down effects because it's like she's small. We get like fatal push effects because she's small. We got to be careful of that. Board wipe effects. We are a creature heavy deck and we need our creatures to win, so having our board be wiped is kind of a big deal. And then finally, not being able to activate our activated abilities will make us lose the game. Cursed Totem, Linvala essentially say the same thing. And Demotion, people don't really run, but it's just kind of sometimes passive, stapled on into pacifism effects like that. So the Planeswalkers, the only one we're running is actually just Domri. I like Domri because 1, creatures you control get +1/+0. Instantly, all our activated abilities cost 2 less with Agatha and Domri on the field. Then we can just get them for mana, and then we can use that for creature spells, and then they can't be countered. Or he's just kind of removable because we can have one of our bigger creatures kill one of our opponent's smaller creatures. Going into our creatures, Baal's Invoker is basically, in my opinion, one of the best examples of this. So when you look at his ability, right, he cost 8 mana to deal 4 damage to each opponent, but when you think our whole game plan is getting Agatha big, and essentially it's only going to cost 1 mana to deal 4 damage to each opponent, and we can do that at instant speed whenever we want. We can just start torching people, right? Again, Captivating Crew, 1 mana, just costs 1 red, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gets haste, and you can only do it when you can do a sorcery. But like, we're just gonna steal all our opponent's creatures for 1 mana each. Like, they'll have haste, and then we're just gonna beat down. Defiler of Vigor is great because he is a 5 mana 6/6 with trample, because that's good old fashioned 2023 magic there. As an additional cost to cast green spells, you may pay 2 life, and then if we do, those green mana in their pips, they're just Phyrexian. So basically, instead of paying 1 green pip in a spell's cost, we can pay 2 life instead. But whenever you cast a green permanent, put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. So not only does it beef up all our creatures, more importantly, it beefs up Agatha, right? Because now, with just that on the field, like, by simply playing the game and having our guys cost less, and now our guys are getting bigger and bigger, and now they're costing less and less because of Agatha's ability, is really cool. Atali, Primal Conqueror, and Primal Sickness. Let's go into them. Primal Conqueror, just straight up 7 mana 7/7 with trample. When he enters the battlefield, exile the top card of each player's library until you reveal a non-land card, and then you may cast any of those cards. Atali is like, for those of you who know Atali, he is unreasonable. Like, he's so crazy. And then the cool thing with Atali Primal Conqueror is he costs 9 and then a Phyrexian Green. We're just going to pay the 2 in life because that 9 mana is pretty much free. Now, he's an 11/11, trample, indestructible, and infect, but you didn't hear that from me. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. If he hits someone, they just straight up lose. Flamewake Evoker is the same idea as Ball. He just says pay 1 red, assuming Agatha is big, and that's the whole game plan of the deck, is for Agatha to be big. Deals 5 damage to target player. So again, we just pay a bunch of red at instant speed. We just torch someone. Forgotten Ancient is great. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may remove any number of 1/1 counters from Forgotten Ancient to other creatures. He's great because we're going to get to our turn. Assuming each player casts at least 1 spell on their turn, we're just going to put all of those counters from Forgotten Ancient onto Agatha. Now she has 3 counters. Now our stuff costs 4 less at the very least. Sounds good to me. Frontier Guide, I think, is pretty neat just because we need land. We actually have like 37 land in the deck because we want to be able to just mash out abilities. Like, let's go back. For like Flamewake Invoker, we just want to be able to keep mashing red and paying red to deal 5 damage to players. So we kind of need a lot of lands. And the fact that Frontier Guide can just pay green and tap it to get a basic land to the battlefield out of our library every turn, it's kind of nice. Goblin I'm gonna mess this up. Goblin, Anarchaeomancer, maybe Anarchymancer. Thanks, Goblin Shaman. Each spell that you cast that is red or green costs 1 less. He just makes all of our spells cost at least 1 less. Guardian Augmenter is kind of funny because he is just a 3 mana 2/2 with flash. Commander creatures you control get +2/+2, which is a big deal because now Agatha, all our spells cost at least 3 less, and commanders you control have hexproof, so now Agatha is even more protected. Really great. Hana and Elena Partners is really cool because they come in first strike reach at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put X 1/1 counters on target creature you control, where X is that creature's power and that creature gains haste. The cool thing about that is we can just like play down Agatha and then put 2 1/1 counters on her, and now instantly, like, we can just put 2 1/1 counters on Agatha every turn on combat. At the very, very least, assuming nothing cool happens with Hana and Elena. All our stuff is always going to cost 2 less. Incubation Druid is really cool. At a 1 mana, basically you tap it for any mana one of your lands can produce. And then if it has a 1/1 counter on it, we can tap her for 3 mana instead, but she has Adapt 3, which really means we just pay 2 mana to put 3 1/1 counters on her. Now we have a 3/5 that taps for 3 mana. Pretty cool. Hound Tamer and Untamed Pup. Hound Tamer is a 3 mana 3/3 with trample that you can pay basically a green and put a 1/1 counter on target Agatha. And then it says trample other wolves and werewolves you control have trample, which I think we have a few. Not a crazy amount, but I think it might be relevant. Doesn't matter because we can still just put a 1/1 counter on Agatha for 1 green. Kami of Whispered Hopes. If 1 or more 1/1 counters will be put on a permanent you control, that many plus 1 of those counters are put instead, and then we can just tap it for a mana where X is Kami's power. It's great because it's basically hardened scales on a mana dork, and that's just what I like. Lava Fume Invoker. Pay 1 mana, creatures you control gain +3/+0 until end of turn. The cool thing about Lava Fume Invoker is we're just, and Agatha really in general, is we're going to go to combat, and then let's just see how our opponents block. If they block poorly, we'll just pay like 3 mana to give all our creatures +9/+0. That sounds pretty cool. Leafkin Avenger is 4 mana for a 4/3. We can tap him to add a mana to our pool for each creature we control with power 4 or greater, which he does include himself, which is nice. But then we can pay 1 green, and it deals damage equal to his power to target player or planeswalker. So again, that's going to hit planeswalkers, it's going to hit players. It's just a red for deal 4 damage to whatever. It's great. Magus of the Candelabra, I think, is so cool. The way this is going to work, right, is we are going to just straight up tap all our lands, right? and then we are going to pay 1 mana into him, and then however much Agatha's power is, and then we're going to untap that many lands. Each land that we untap is another activated ability of something like Lava Fume or Leafkin. It's really cool. Rada Herald of the Celt is great, is a 3 mana 3/3 with first strike sometimes if it's your turn. We can look at the top card of our library and play lands from them. Then we can pay a red and a green to give her +X, where X is the number of lands we control. Again, and actually before I talk about that, let's go into Reckless Amplimancer. For just 2 mana, 2/2, pay a green, double its power and toughness until end of turn. I like these guys that have built-in combat tricks, because we can just go to attack and our opponent's like, how should I block? Because now it makes, like, basically Agatha makes Reckless Amplifier incredibly scary to deal with. Because again, we can just pay, okay, do some quick math with me really quick. She's a 2/2, pay a green, 4/4, and we have an 8/8, 16/16, 32/32, 64/64 after only paying 5 mana. So we have a 64/64 for 5 mana. That's crazy. Seedborn Muse is fantastic. Seedborn Muse says, untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. The big deal about that is we can now do funny stuff like Leafkin, Avenger, or putting 1/1 counters or whatever on our opponent's turn and not just our turn. So we can be kind of more loose with our mana and all that cool stuff. Plus all our creatures are going to untap so we can swing out. Sylvanas' Invoker. We have a 3 mana 3/2. It says Conjure Elemental. Pay 1 mana. Untap target land you control. It becomes an 8/8 creature, elemental creature with trample and haste, and it's still a land. This card's kind of cool because, one, at the very worst, it's just we have infinite taps with him and Agatha because we'll just pay 1 mana, untap a land, tap that land for another one, untap that same land, whatever. Infinite taps if it's relevant. But I like the idea of just being able to spend 1 mana to turn one of our lands into an 8/8. I kind of think with trample and haste, this is going to help with cool beatdowns if we don't have enough creatures and we really want to go wide. Soul of New Phyrexia is really cool because it's a 6 mana 6/6 with trample. Don't really worry about the bottom effect. That's kind of a nice fun one-off. But we can just pay 1 mana to give our permanents indestructible until end of turn. Just 1 mana, our permanents are indestructible. Now, it's going to cost 5 mana when we do it from the graveyard. But ideally, it's not going to get to the graveyard because it's only 1 mana, again, to make it indestructible, and our whole team. Spawn Sire of Ulamog is an infinite combo for infinite colorless mana with Agatha if it actually doesn't have to be that big. So Spawn Sire is a big deal. It's a 10 mana 7/11 with Annihilator 1. So if Agatha has just straight up, if Agatha is a 3/3, we're just going to pay 1 mana to get 2 guys that each sack 4 mana. So the way that this is infinite is just pay 1 mana from one of our lands. Now we have 2 guys that can sacrifice for mana. Sacrifice one of those guys, get another 2. Sacrifice one of those 2, get another 2. So it's like we're going to have infinite 0/1s, and we're going to have infinite colorless mana. And with those infinite 0/1s, we can just pay a red and a green into Agatha, and now they are an army of 1/2s with trample and haste, infinite 1/2s and trample and haste. That's kind of cool. Spawn Sire of Ulamog has also the activated Dream of 20 mana. Cast any number of Eldrazi cards you own from outside their game without paying the mana cost. The issue is EDH and Commander, the same thing really. They have a rule that says basically you can only cast, like, these cards, when they say that, really mean you can cast them from your sideboard, and Commander doesn't have a sideboard. So that 20 ability, even though it'll only cost 1 mana maybe, doesn't do anything because we don't have a sideboard. You can rule 0 it with your friends if you choose to. Rule 0 with your friends, then you could play them, but it's just an infinite combo for 4 mana anyways. Steel Hellkite.
I'm still not sure about that.
That was my watch. Steel Hellkite says 6 mana, flying, 5/5. We can pay 1 mana to give him +1/+1 until end of turn, which isn't super exciting, but the cool thing about him is we can pay X. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X, whose controller was dealt combat damage this turn by Steel Hellkite, and we can activate it only once. The cool thing about Steel Hellkite is we can basically pay 1 mana to destroy our opponent's board, one of the mana costs of their board. So a fun fact you can do with Steel Hellkite is you can attack an opponent, deal 5 damage to them, pay X as 0, destroy all their tokens, and 0 drops. But it's nice to be able to pick and choose what we want to get rid of. And then we can also just pump it if we want. Svella, Ice Shaper, is really cool with this deck. I actually really like it because we can pay 1 mana to get a Manalith, which is just add 1 mana of any color, and sometimes snow mana too. And then we can pay 2 mana and tap her to look at the top 4 cards of our library, and you may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost and put the rest on the bottom. So we can either get a free spell from the top 4 cards of our deck, or we can just make a Monolith. Kind of early game, we're going to do the Monolith, and then late game, we're going to do the big thing for only 2 mana, but Svella is very cool. Then we have Valakut Invoker, 8 mana, which is really 1 mana, deals 3 damage to any target. So we can get rid of problematic creatures, we can just get rid of planeswalkers, we can just hit our opponent for 3 a bunch. It's just basically, Valakut Invoker just says you have infinite lightning bolts. That's pretty much all he says. Uvenwald Oddity and Behemoth are great. Trample Haste for a 4/4 for 4 is great. And then we can pay a green to transform it to say, Trample Haste, other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Trample and Haste, which is cool because not only does it now turn this 4/4 into an 8/8 for 2 mana, it also makes all of our other guys +1 bigger and Trample and Haste, and that also makes Agatha 1 bigger, so now all of our things cost just 1 less. Walking Ballista is cool. It's going to come in with X/1/1 counters, however you want. Since it has an activated ability of 4, basically the way you can read it is pay 1 mana, put a 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista, remove 1 counter from Walking Ballista, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So really, just pay 1 mana, deal 1 damage. I think it's great. The cool thing I like about it is we can kind of go to like an end of turn thing and just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna load up Walking Ballista if we really don't have much else to do. I think it's just an idea, and being able to just shoot down creatures or planeswalkers, or not planeswalkers, well, maybe planeswalkers, maybe it's errated, but either way, just shooting down stuff is cool. Vorinclex. It's just straight up Vorinclex. Trample Reach. When he enters the battlefield, search our library for up to 2 forest cards, not basic forest, just any forests, and then put them in our hand and shuffle our deck. Then we can pay 2 mana to exile Vorinclex and then return him to the battlefield transformed as the Saga to the right, which is the Grand Evolution. When he transforms, when you pay that 2 mana, we're going to mill 10 cards, put 2 creature cards from among the milled cards onto our battlefield. Then we're going to distribute 7 1/1 counters among any number of target creatures we control, most likely all going to Agatha. And then creatures you control gain, pay a mana, this creature fights target creature you don't control, and then we return him back to the battlefield as Vorinclex. I think this card's cool. Vorinclex is cool just as himself. It's a 5 mana 6/6 with Trample and Reach. So, you know, we're going to pay 2 mana, get a bunch of cards, make Agatha huge, and make all our things cost nothing, and then have free fight spells if we need it. Wildheart Invoker, we have 8 mana. Target creature gets +5/+5 and gains Trample until end of turn. See, I like these cards. I think they're so cool. Is just because, one, they essentially cost 1 mana. They're combat tricks, so we can just swing in, pay no mana, and then depending how our opponents block, just say, oh yeah, I'm going to pay 3 mana into this, and now this creature is +15/+15 and trample, so deal with that. Also, these kind of cards can be used to buff Agatha if she's not quite there yet. If, like, she's still small, and we have to be like, oh yeah, I think I'll pay, like, 3 mana to now make Agatha essentially an 8/8. Or whatever, so now that ability only costs 1 until end of turn. I think that's pretty worthwhile. Going into sorceries. Cultivate and search our library for 2 basic lands, most likely just a mountain and a forest. Put 1 in the field, 1 in our hand. Cool. Decimate. Destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, and target land. It is a brutal spell, but something important about this card is that you cannot cast it unless you have a target. If you can destroy an artifact, a creature, and a land, but there is no legal enchantment on the board for you to target, you simply cannot do it. You can't cast it. But most likely, in Commander, someone's going to have an artifact, someone's going to have a creature, again, enchantment, land. Hull Breach is great because it says choose 1, and we're pretty much going to do the bottom one every time. Destroy an artifact and an enchantment. For 2 mana, it's great removal. Kodama's Reach is basically Cultivate, but it's a little bit better because it's arcane. Nature's Lure, search your library for a forest card, not a basic forest, just a forest card, put it on the battlefield, not tapped, then shuffle our deck. So again, with Nature's Lore effects and 3 visits, I'm not going to go into because it's literally the next card. These kind of effects, basically, I like them a lot because they cost 2 mana. At the very worst, you just get a basic forest card untapped, so now you just ramped a forest for essentially 1 mana. Or you can get your shock lands, you can get your triumphs. We don't have triumphs in this deck, but you can get your shock lands, you can get your triumphs, you can get any of the lands that say forest on it. Like, you'll see, we have another one. Rishkar's expertise, I like the idea of in this deck, just because if we have the idea of making Agatha big, we can just pay 6 mana, and again, we're a Gruul, and we have a lot of ramp in this deck. Pay 6 mana, draw a card equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, so let's just assume Agatha's like 8, right? Let's assume Agatha's an 8/8, because a lot of our things, the highest cost is like 8, right? So Agatha's an 8/8, we're going to draw 8 cards, and then we can cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. So for 6 mana to draw 8 cards, and then just play one of them for free is really good. And then 3 visits is the same exact card as Nature's Lore. Let's going into instance. Beast Within, destroy target permanent. Its controller can have a 3/3 beast. I can promise you, whatever we're getting rid of is way better, a 3/3 beast is much better than what we're getting rid of. We do not want them to have whatever they're getting rid of. A 3/3 beast is manageable. Chaos Warp is the same logic as Beast Within, but sometimes it's great and sometimes it's bad. Chaos Warp is great because it's the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, so it can get around things like Indestructible, right? But then its opponent shuffles their library, reveals the top card of the deck, and then if it's a permanent, put it on the battlefield. Here's the scary thing about that, is most likely, right, because usually decks have about 35 lands on average, you got a 1 in 3 chance that you just got rid of a big scary thing and they get like a land out of it. But that's not always true. Sometimes the things you get rid of can be a lot worse. Like, I have definitely used Chaos Warp. One example is getting rid of like an Oracle of Moldiah, and then they get an Eldrazi out of it. It's not a perfect card, but generally it's pretty good. Deflecting SWAT, if you control our commander, we can play it for free. And you know, the whole point of this deck is to have Agatha on the field, so we're probably going to have it, so it's going to be free. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability. I like this card. I think it's fantastic. Anyone who's played Commander and played with it or against it knows how good it is. It's a free spell. If someone tries to say, oh, destroy target creature, get rid of Agatha, actually, I think we're going to copy that spell, or not copy it, choose new targets for that spell, and it's going to be your commander. Or someone wants to play target player, takes an extra turn, I think we're going to be that target instead. It's a great card. Heroic Intervention, we're a creature deck. Permanent you control gain hexproof and indestructible. If someone nukes, this is kind of our out. Invigorate is cool with Agatha. If you control a forest, rather than pay Invigorate's mana cost, you may have an opponent gain 3 life. We're just going to do that because it's a free spell. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So we're just going to do that to Agatha, and then just for free have Agatha be at least a 5/5, and now all of our things cost 5 less. So they're most likely just going to cost 1 mana. It's just a great, easy way to buff Agatha if we don't have any easy way to do it. And since we're a Gruul deck, we're going to have a forest. We actually have 18 of them in the deck. Then we have Return of the Wild Speaker. Same idea of Rishkar's expertise, but it can also just kill someone. So we can either do whatever we need most, really. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures we control. Unfortunately, Agatha's a creature, or sorry, she's a creature for sure. Agatha's a human. So the top one won't really work for her, but if we have other big creatures, it's still pretty good. Or non-human creatures you control gain +3/+3 until end of turn. So it's a great combat trick. It's a great end of turn if someone wants to swing into us. We can just block and kill other stuff. If we want to kill someone, we just do this after the blocks are declared. Or we want to draw a couple cards, Return of the Wild Speaker. Snakeskin Veil, put a 1/1 counter on target Agatha you control, and she gains hexproof until end of turn for 1 mana. So not only does it get her hexproof if someone tries to kill it, but it also buffs her up a little bit. Tamio Safekeeping, target Agatha you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and then we gain 2 life. No one's getting rid of it. Tyvar Stand, target Agatha you control gets +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This one's important because this one has an X cost, and it's going to give Agatha +X/+X. We could just pay a green and then 0 for X, and she'll still get indestructible and hexproof, and then at that point it's still just no life gain Tameo safekeeping. But we can also just in a pinch say, oh, you know, Agatha's like a 1/1 and we kind of need her to be big right now. Like, she died for some reason. We need her to be big. We're just going to buff her up a little bit, now make our activated abilities like X less, which is great. Going into artifacts, we have Agatha's Soul Cauldron. It's literally her cauldron. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. This is important when we have colorless sources or, you know, whatever. Say we don't have any green mana and we need to activate red abilities, fixes the problem. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So again, if we can just, and then we'll exile target card from the graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, I put a 1/1 counter on target Agatha you control. So, not only can we exile cards from graveyards, which is great because graveyard hate is important in Commander. It's also going to buff Agatha herself, and then it's going to give her new activated abilities, which then in turn are going to cost less, and then the mana will then fix itself because the top ability. Very cool. Arcane Signet is just a good rock. I think it's good. Blackblade Reforged. I generally don't put this card in decks because, I mean, it's fine for commander damage. But we have a lot of lands. We have 37 lands total. Equipped creature you control gains +1/+1 for each land we control. Assuming generally we're going to probably, like, what? This comes down turn 3. We'll play Agatha turn 2. This comes down turn 3. We'll equip it turn 4. It's going to give Agatha at least +4/+4, and that's pretty much it, just +4/+4. And she's only going to get bigger and bigger. I think it's good. It's an easy way if Agatha dies, if someone like bounces her or nukes it, whatever, just say, whatever, pay 3 mana, now Agatha's big again. I think it's good. Rule Signet is just a way to turn colorless into green-red. Perfect for activating Agatha's ability. Lightning Greaves. Sussy part about Lightning Greaves. 2 mana, equipped creature has haste and Shroud. Shroud is the issue, but it does have an equip cost of 0. Since we are a creature deck, we will be able to flip around the equip so we can, you know, if we need to do something to Agatha, we can put the Shroud on another creature for 0 and then do whatever we want with Agatha and then put the boots right back. But generally, we need Agatha to be protected. Even if she's reducing our costs by just 1, just for whatever she is, that's still important. Ronus's Monument. 3 mana, green creature spells you cast cost 1 less. And then whenever you cast a green creature spell, which is like 60% of the green is like 60% of the deck, whenever you cast a green creature spell, target creature you control gains +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. It's going to make Agatha bigger, a little bit easier. And plus it's a cost reducer. So it kind of makes our green creatures 2 for 1. Then we have Soul Ring because it's Soul Ring, and Swiftfoot Boots is just a little safer Lightning Greaves because we can target it if it has hexproof. Let's going into enchantments. Bard class. Legendary creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on them. I think this is cool. So then, level it up. Legendary spells you cast cost red and green less to cast. This spell only reduces the amount of color mana you play. And then whenever you cast a legendary spell, exit the top 2 cards of your library and you can play them. Here's how I like looking at this card, right? If it's in our opening hand, right? Turn 1, mountain, whatever. Turn 2, forest, play Bard class. Turn 3, level up Bard class and play a land. Now, Agatha costs nothing. So we just play Agatha for free. And now we have a free Agatha. And then it's just a perpetual cost reducer forever. And then whenever we cast a legendary spell, we can do a little bit of funny card advantage. But generally, it's to keep Agatha cheaper if she dies. It's to make her enter with a 1/1 counter on her so she's a little bit stronger. Court of Garenbrig is 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 1/1 counters among up to 2 target creatures you control. Then, if you're the monarch, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Here's how I see this card playing out. Turn 2, play Agatha. Turn 3, play Court of Garenbrig. Become the monarch, draw an extra card. Then, on our next turn, we're going to put 2 1/1 counters on her. And then, if we're still the monarch, and we still didn't take damage, we're going to have 4 1/1 counters on her, so now everything's cost reduced. Here's the thing I like about these cards. 1, Monarch makes the games fast and interesting, so it's kind of, you don't have to worry about slower games. And 2, the fact that we're just going to put 2 1/1 counters on Agatha every turn is still good, even if we're not the Monarch. Guardian Project, we have like 30 creatures in this deck, so whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, if it's not a token, draw a card. Seems good to me. Commander staple. Rancor. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has trample, and then whenever Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to our owner's hand. Here's what's cool about Rancor. Agatha, her cost reduction only checks power, not toughness. So the fact that we can just pay 1 mana to give her down, just make her a 3/1 with trample, and then even if she dies or Rancor's put away, we'll just do it again later. It's basically a way we can give Agatha perpetually +1 or +2/+0. So our things will always cost at least 3 less. Rhythm of the Wild, creature spells can't be countered. Creatures you control have non-token creatures you control have riot. So our creatures not being countered, big deal. Having them enter the battlefield with the choice of a 1/1 counter on it or haste, also a big deal. If Agatha dies later on, we want to have her enter with a 1/1 counter. Probably not haste because she's just a 1/1. But again, that 1/1 counter is going to be relevant. Virtue of Courage, I like the idea of, and hear me out on it. 2 mana, instant, deals 2 damage to any target. At face value, it's a bad shock. It's no big deal. But then later when we cast it, right? Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. It's kind of scary, but I think we can deck ourselves out in the best possible way. Because when we have cards that say, oh yeah, deal like 5 damage to target opponent, it's like we're now going 5 cards deep and it's just good card advantage. I think it's neat. Maybe it's too treacherous because we could deck ourselves potentially. Actually, it's not because it's a you may ability, so don't even worry about that. And then the final enchantment is Wilderness Reclamation. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. I like this card because it lets us pretty much ball out however much we need to on combat, do all the combat tricks we want, and then when we go to the end of our turn, all our lands untap anyways. So if we have any abilities that are like, oh, deal like 4 damage to each opponent or whatever, right? Like we can still keep mashing them on our opponent's turns because we just untapped all our lands. Going into lands, Cinderglade, Mountain Forest, you can tutor this with Nature's Lore in 3 visits. It's important. Enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. We straight up, we'll talk about the basic lands in a second, but we got a lot. Command Tower, it's an untapped duel. Kessig Wolfrun, it's going to give a creature +X/+0 and trample, which is great as a combat trick, and then we can also just mash up our commander, and make her big. Agatha. We're not going to be able to reduce the cost on the land because she only works for creatures, but it's still really cool. Reliquary Tower, we have a good amount of card draw. No max hand size is always good. Taps are colorless, who cares? It's still just good to have. Rockfall Vale is going to enter the battlefield untapped, most likely. And then Rootbound Crag is also going to enter the battlefield untapped. Finally, we have Spire Garden, enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. The way I build these decks is we're in a pot of 4, so we have 3 opponents. So it's entering untapped. And if it's entering tapped, you're probably late game enough to the point where one of your guys has already died. Stomping Grounds, just a shock land. Mountain Forest, you can tutor it. When it enters the battlefield, it may pay 2 life. If you don't, enters tapped. It's an untapped duel when you need it. It's a tap land when you don't. And then for lands, we have 18 forests and we have 11 mountains. We're really just green heavy in this deck. It's literally like a 60-30 split or whatever it is. So we're going to want more green than we are mountains, and we're also running a total of 37 lands because we want to be able to activate our activated abilities as much as possible. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you liked it, whatever, do all that good stuff, and then comment what kind of commander or deck type you want me to do next. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.